Buenas noches, familia. Muy buenas noches. Buenas noches, amigos de Instagram Live. Estamos en vivo en YouTube y démosle la bienvenida a Leo Severino.
Hola. ¿Qué pasó, frater?
¿Qué pasó, frater? A ver, saluda a tus hermanos y hermanas de YouTube.
Hola a todos de YouTube. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Ahora disfruten estos minutos que estamos juntos. Gracias por estar con nosotros.
Muy bien. Ánimo. Empezamos. To the point. Thank you so much. It's been a long time.
Let's wait. Some people are still logging on, I think.
Ya. ¿Cómo estás, frater? ¿Ya estás en casa? ¿Ya no estás? Ayer estabas como a una hora de tu casa, ¿no?
Sí, bueno, mi casa, o sea, donde estoy viviendo aquí en Nueva York.
Una muy mala señal, por eso no nos pudimos conectar ayer en la noche. Tratamos y ya al final se hizo muy tarde, iba a llegar a su casa tipo 11 de la noche y bueno, decidimos hacerlo hoy. El horario siempre va a ser entre 9 y 10 por los horarios de trabajo que tenemos. Yo aquí en México, Leo, Nueva York. ¿Comenzamos?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest Going Deeper. We're going to take off right where we left off, which is we have moved through the faculties from the lower faculties to the higher faculties. I believe this stuff is available now on YouTube. Is that right, Frater?
Sí.
If you want to review.
En YouTube pueden escucharlo. Van a ver la imagen de Leo solamente al principio cuando saluda, pero pueden escucharlo perfectamente.
Great. And so we're moving from the lower faculties and from the different virtues that modify all those lower faculties. Recall that the definition of virtue is that which orders a faculty to its proper end. In other words, our faculties, by our nature, by the way our nature is, not the way God originally intended, by the way it is now, our nature is disordered. And that's just a fact. And we can all recognize this. We know that our mind seems to be about grasping the truth, yet we don't grasp all truth easily. We know that we're supposed to be ordered towards doing good things. And we know that we don't always do good things. And so we know that there's a disinclination in us. And virtue is that acquired habit in these faculties that order us towards the good. The immediate good, be it relative to health or rest or sex or all the stuff that we discussed, or anger or fear, or be it the ultimate good, which is God. And that's where our purpose resides. Our purpose resides in knowing the truth and in choosing the good. That is, in knowing God and loving God. And we won't belabor the point, but it's because God is goodness itself. He is existence itself. And he is love itself, in as much as he wills only the good, and in as much as he knows only the truth, right? And he is the author and the creator of all things that are good and true, so he holds them all in existence. So the immediate good gets us to our ultimate good. Then the question is this: we're moving from the lower faculties, from the concupiscible appetite, from the irascible appetite, we're moving up to the intellect. And that's what tonight's session is about. How do we know what is good? And I mean it in the most general of senses, right? And the answer has been one that philosophy and moral theology has grappled with for millennia. And the answer in various forms is essentially the same, and it's this. There are three conditions that are necessary for a thing to be good. First, there's an interior condition relative to the person who's doing, relative to the person that's acting. Second, there's an exterior thing relative to the person that's acting. Third, there's the circumstances surrounding the person that's acting. So by the interior thing, what we mean is the intention. A very, very good, what appears to be a good thing can actually be very bad if it's done for improper intention, internal intention. We'll discuss why and how. Second, the external action. The internal intention, that's called the end, the purpose. What's the intention? The external action is called the object. What is the thing that is being done? And finally, the surrounding circumstances is just known as the circumstances, right? The things that stand around the action. So I'll give an example. I'm in New York City right now, and let's say a man takes a purse from a woman on the street. Is that a good action or is that a bad action?
It depends.
It depends on what, Eduardo?
So a man
takes a purse from a woman.
Okay, it depends, because what if that purse belongs to him?
Exactly right. So the condition of the purse,
or to his wife, and this woman stole it.
What if he's a police officer, and so his intent is to stop, right? So we can't just look at a thing, at the action itself, and know whether the thing is good or bad. We have to dig deeper. We have to see to the intentions of the person, the action that's being done, the object, and then the circumstances. All right? One man throws another man off a building. Same sort of thing. Is that a good or bad thing? Well, on its face, wow, it's shocking. It seems terrible. Okay. What if the guy was in self-defense? What if someone was coming at him and they're fighting top of a building, he's trying to kill him?
Yeah.
And
what if he has a bomb that is going to kill 40 people?
And he's trying to disarm them, right? What if it's accidental? There's so many things that are surrounding the act itself that we need to know in order to judge if a thing is good or bad. This is why there's only one person we can actually judge. Only one person on this planet that we can actually judge, ourselves. Now, can we judge the exteriors? Yes, we have to judge the exteriors. If you guys have seen my children, right? I can't be like, well, listen, kids, go ahead and take candy from that creepy-looking guy in the van outside the house. Who am I to judge who he is? I don't, No, you judge exteriors. That's how we live life, right? We judge whether we're going to go or stop based upon whether we think other cars are going or stopping. We judge exteriors, but we can't judge interiors. So we can't ultimately know, since that's a condition for whether an act is good or bad, the interiors of anybody else. We can't know their intentions. And as we don't know their intentions, we don't know the depth of what is good or bad. So it requires a lot of knowledge to judge a thing whether it's good or bad. And that knowledge is only intimately available to ourselves. Intimately, like we know our own intentions. We can examine those. We have access to those interiors. I'll give another example where you see that the object might be fine. Let's say it's the marriage act, the conjugal act, right? It's a husband and wife, so it's a proper object, right? And they have the proper intent. They're open to life. They're open to what's built in to the design of the sexual act itself. So the object is correct, the end is correct, but they decide that they're going to do this in the middle of a restaurant on a crowded Friday night. Bad circumstances. Bad circumstances render the act bad just as much as the act itself or as the intention. Each one of these on their own can ruin the moral goodness of an act. All of these three you have to have what's called, it has to be integral. Each one of these has to be good on their own in order for the entire act to be good. The internal, the external act, and the circumstances. So that's what is necessary in prudence. Last time we said that part of what we're trying to do here is take authority over what we've been given. Like to actually act with responsibility towards our ultimate purpose. To not walk around as if we're walking around with grenades and not knowing how they work, right? Walking around with our bodies, not knowing our purpose. Walking around with our souls, not knowing our purpose. We're trying to take authority, and we defined authority in a very limited way as the ability, the power to determine the means to the end. Well, prudence itself is the way that the means are determined to be good. What should the end be? How do I get to the end? What should my intention be towards the end? Let me give you an example of when the object might be fine, the circumstances might be fine, but the intention is bad. If someone was to say, feed the hungry, and instead of going to a soup kitchen and donating or whatever else, they decided that they're going to feed the hungry, but I'm gonna take a BB gun and I'm gonna start shooting peanut butter pellets. I'm just making up something ridiculous into people's mouths, right? Well, if my intent is to hurt them, that renders the act evil, even if there is a sort of feeding to it. Maybe that's a stupid example, but you get the idea. All these circumstances need to align in order for the act to be good. This is where prudence comes into play. Prudence is what gauges the circumstances, the object, and the intention. The end, the object, and the circumstances. And the sub-virtues of prudence all apply to each one of these three forms of what is good. So tonight's topic, essentially, is prudence. It's that virtue which moderates the intellect. We said that the wound from our fallen nature to the intellect is darkness. Our intellect is dark. We don't know exactly the circumstances. We don't know our own intent so well. We don't know how to gauge an act, whether it's good or bad, on our own. So we have to develop the virtue. And developing the virtue of prudence is the way that we develop our minds so that we can start thinking about these things in its proper context. Now, the virtue of prudence has many sub-virtues, and we talked about them briefly. We're going to grab a couple, and we're going to talk to them at length. First, in order to be able to gauge whether a thing is right, we have to know the principles. We have to know what are the principles that govern moral behavior. In other words, if we don't know, for example, the purpose of a cell phone, as I've used as an example before, then we won't be able to know the good of the cell phone. In the same way, if we don't know the purpose of our human life, if we don't have our goal on the ultimate purpose, which is a supernatural calling to know and love God himself, then we're never going to be able to achieve the immediate good purpose. We're never going to have prudence. Prudence requires that not only we know what our purpose is, but we have to know enough about our design to gauge how we need to apply ourselves to external things so that we have good results. Now, how do we do that? How do we grow in knowledge of the principles? Well, we don't have it of our own. We're going to see that in most of the cases, all of the theologians from the old classicists and the philosophers who are realists all agree that we have to start by borrowing prudence from others. We know this intuitively. Hardly anybody says, you know what, I'm gonna figure out nuclear engineering on my own in my bedroom. I'm just gonna figure it out. No, there's places where people that know this stuff go and teach nuclear engineering and the basics of, mathematical principles or whatever else. If you want to become a doctor, you go to med school because the people there already have that knowledge, and it requires the docility for us to take counsel from the people that know in order for us to grow in the virtue of medicine, which is science is actually a virtue. It's a developed habit that acquires towards the good of a created end. In the same way, it's crazy. In this world now, it's literally everyone, it's what we started with. Everyone's about living their own truth. Just go live your truth, I'll live my truth. And so we judge good and bad, not based on some sort of logical, deductive process, not even based on a scientific method or an empirical method. We base it just on our own feelings.
Yeah, your emotions.
And why? Because if it's not rooted in a logical truth, if it's not prudent in the intellect because we have the virtue of knowledge, because we've studied moral theology or philosophy or the sort of stuff that we're talking about tonight, then what is it going to be based on? It's not going to be based on the actual truth as it is in reality, and us adequating our mind to that truth, as we said the definition of humility is, and fulfilling our purpose, which is to know that truth. It's just going to be our emotions guiding us. The emotions pulling us one way or another, spinning the image.
Based on your experience.
Exactly right. It would be what Mr. Blitzy just put in the comments. It will just be moral relativism, which we know isn't morality. Moral relativism means everyone can determine what is good on their own. And if everyone can determine what is good on their own, then there's no such thing as good. Because what is there to say that if my definition of good is to rape and kill and pillage, then your definition of good to not do those things is any better? There ultimately has to be an objective standard. And that objective standard, if it is objective, it is only known by studying the truth. So it is not an excuse. And it is not a justification cannot learn this stuff. We have to follow logic where it leads if we're going to know the truth. We can't just sit back and be like, you know what, I feel that this is the right thing. If we're doing so, we're not taking authority over the very design of our intellect that is where our purpose resides. So what do we have to do? We have to study. Learn from the learned. Read books. We've been negligent. Somebody's asked us for a book list recommendation. I wrote it out. We just haven't posted it. I'll send it to Eduardo, but I'll give you a few books to start. I won't be self-serving, so I won't say my own book, Going Deeper, but I will say...
but I can say that. So Going Deeper, the first one. Second one?
there's just relative to the stuff that we're discussing. I'll give you a few right off the bat, and Eduardo maybe can post this. There's an incredible theologian. He was mid-1900s. His name is Frank Sheed, Sheed. He has a book called Theology and Sanity, which is fantastic. C.S. Lewis writes about this very stuff. He writes about, particularly, there's a book called The Problem of Pain, where he ratchets through human purpose relative to pain in our design. He also has a book called Miracles, which walks through the possibility of a supernatural end to a natural entity. So I recommend those three. I also recommend a book called Spiritual Theology by Jordan Aumann, Aumann. It is fantastic. It walks through all the virtues. There's a book called The Cardinal Virtues by Joseph Pieper. I think it's P-I-E-P-E-R. It might be P-E-I, but it's called The Cardinal Virtues. Walks through all the virtues. And then, listen, if you want to go really, really, really deep, and you want to have a crazy, crazy heavy book that's, massively that thick, and it's one of the best books I've ever read, and it is amazing. I'm going to recommend two of them. One of them is, of course, the Summa Theologica by St. Thomas Aquinas. That's a tough one, but it has everything. And then the other is called Introduction to the Science of Mental Health. Introduction to the Science of Mental Health by Father Chad Ripperger, R-I-P-P-E-R-G-E-R.
Our spiritual director.
Massive in its opus, and it's just the introduction to the science of mental health. All right, so.
And something more light. Leo, something from Peter Crave, I think it's very easy reading, and it's very, very powerful because it gives you a lot of strong arguments to fight relativism.
I'll give you two more, right? So Peter Crave is great. He's a philosophy professor out of Boston College. It's K-R-E-E-F-T, and it's pronounced Crave. And he has a great book on moral relativism. Just look for his book on truth. And then the second is that same author that I mentioned originally, Frank Sheed. He has a book called A Map for Life, and it talks about the purpose of life. Those are all great. We'll give you the list, not to belabor the point, but the idea was this. We don't presume that we have it on our own. Every other science, we would go to books. We would go to the people who have the knowledge. Why do we presume that morality is any different? Why do we presume that what is good is any different? Right? We have to go to the people who know this stuff and study, and that requires a sub-virtue. The sub-virtue is called docility. Docility is a virtue whereby we grow in the ability to learn and be led from others who are superior to us. What do I mean superior? I don't mean generally like they're superhuman. I mean superior in the sense of they know more than we do in a particular area. That's always been the traditional definition of a superior. It's a person who has that authority because they know more. They know more of the truth. In the same way, for us, we have to grow in docility. There's one thing that kills docility. It's called, here's the logical, for those of you who want to go deeper, the logical term is circumstantial ad hominem. And what it means is this: we dismiss the message because of the messenger. So to use a very crass example, obviously, right? To use a very basic example, if Hitler walked in the room and said, you need to eat your vegetables, kitty, right? And he's talking to a 5-year-old. We could be like, Hitler, man, why would you listen to anything he said? Well, not that you should listen to Hitler. You get my point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who it is who's speaking.
But especially when it's more, I mean, that example maybe match better if you see someone that is this big telling someone, eat healthy.
That's exactly right.
Because they then goes, wow, I mean, what? Are you kidding me? Or Hitler telling people never kill anyone.
Exactly right. And that's the thing is we because we don't have proper images, it's tough for us, and it's natural. We associate a voice, a thought, an idea, a communication. We associate that with the images of the person. So if we see an extremely obese person, let's say he's a doctor, and he's prescribing you cholesterol medications, well, hold on a second, right? What's wrong? Well, it doesn't matter. Like, the idea is we have to gauge the truth on its own. And the virtue of docility is that thing that allows us to be led and not to be distracted by the circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
or being judgmental in the sense of like, well, he doesn't have his if that was the case, we would only ever listen to saints, right? And how many of us know other people that are absolutely perfect? We have to try to separate
Mm-hmm.
the image and the cogitative associations with what is being said, and gauge what is being said on its own. And that actually requires practice. It requires this virtue of docility, this virtue of actually actively having the intellect come to the party and say, listen, I may not like this person, but is what they're saying for me good, right? It might be my wife who's driving me nuts. What's she saying true? It might be my kid who doesn't even know how to wipe his nose. But is what he's saying true? We have to learn to separate these things out. We only do it by practice. Here's one that I get all the time, right? That Catholics get all the time. How can a priest say, and he's not married, he's celibate, how can he say anything about marriage? Like, what does he know about marriage? That's like saying a doctor has to have cancer in order to cure cancer. You don't have to have the experience of the actual thing to know the mechanisms. In fact, in many ways, it is that cold, and I don't mean cold in the unemotional way. I mean cold in the objective way. To not have to be worrying about the emotional and the heavy associations that come with marriage. Be able to separate that out, even in our own lives, to see something objectively, right? Now, provided that they are an authority in this, then we are docile. Provided that they know what they're talking about, provided that they have the study and the clarity of mind to be able to articulate and communicate what we're saying, right? The person and their experience isn't the measure relative to an object. Their experience and their knowledge relative to that truth is the measure. And we grow in that by killing our gut instinct to just judge the externals and associate that with the truth, right? Okay. So that's on the side of the actual, the knowing the principles. We have to be docile. We are docile when we open up a book and start reading, right? Our mind is open. It's much easier, right? We don't have the person in front of us on all these sort of associations, right? So we have to have docility towards people that know better than we do. Thomas Aquinas calls this borrowed prudence. We have it intuitively when it comes to an area that we don't know. If I don't know archery, I go to someone who knows archery. If I don't know engineering, I go to university. If I'm a child and I don't know much, I turn naturally, instinctively to my parents. We need to grow in that childlike docility to the things that are true. All right, so then what can we do on our own? What can we do on our own isn't just a matter of docility. It's a matter of having the habit whereby we take previous knowledge and bring it to the forefront. There are 3 virtues that deal with this. The first is the virtue of circumspection. We've talked about this virtue. The virtue of circumspection, the moralists say this. It's the first one that's right. It's the first one that's lost when we do something that is wrong, objectively, or sinful. And it's the last one that's actually gained. Why is it the first one lost? Because when we aren't thinking properly, we block out our surroundings, we block out circumstances that are necessary to see the truth in order to do what we want to do. In other words, if I want to look at this woman lustfully, and she is not my wife, and I want to objectify my wife, let's say, I want to have the option of lust to do this thing. I'm going to focus on this, distract out the fact that this isn't my wife, that I don't have, whatever the circumstances are, to focus in, hyper-focus on those things that give me pleasure, right? If I'm going to be overeating, I'm not going to focus in. I'm going to put the circumstances out of, the diet that I'm on, or the regimen that I'm on, or the fasting that I'm on, or my proper health. Not focus on all that. I'm just going to focus. I'm going to bring to the forefront the things that are good and pleasurable, the taste of the pizza or whatever else. This is true of every single sin that we have committed. Every single sin at some level lacks circumspection, even at this level. At the level of, I'm going to ignore the circumstances of my design and the God who made me, who is actually here present, willing my good. I'm going to block out the circumstances. I'm going to lack circumspection. And we know it more readily. We used the example previously of like when someone gets drunk. When someone gets drunk, they lose their ability to reason. That frontal cortex gets blocked, and they lose the ability to know their circumstances. Now they're talking a little louder, saying things they don't want to say, and they're losing perspective of what the situation that they're in. How do we grow in circumspection? Here's how we grow in circumspection: by developing the habit of deliberateness. Deliberateness is the habit whereby we don't just react to things. We don't just instinctively move. Most instinctive movements are based on the cogitative power. Cogitative power, we know, is a lower faculty, the one that we share with the animals. It's not the higher faculty. It's not the intellect. It's the cogitative power is the thing that makes quick associations. Is it necessary? Yes. Your hand's in the fire. You need to pull it out without thinking. So it serves an incredible function, right? But in most circumstances, we don't just want to act at the cogitative level. We don't just want to act like when we're driving. Most of us who have learned to drive, it's automatic. We're not thinking about our hands and the accelerator and the brake. We're just going. It's already at cogitative level. It's just association. You're not consciously thinking, I have to turn this to make a left. My hands are, we did that when we were learning. We were hyper-focused and we had all of the knowledge in front of us. After a while, it just kind of becomes routine, automatic. Sadly, that's how we live most of our decisions and most of our lives. This is why we lack circumspection. We don't bring into the situation all of the circumstances. So how do we grow in that again? By being deliberate. How do we do that? By thinking before we act. It is a habit that can be learned. Right? I might not be the best example of this right now. It's rattling off, right? But just know, when I'm turning my eyes this way or this way, I've got notes on either side of me. And in those notes are those bullet points for me to remember. This is my form of circumspection for this. This is my moment of taking a moment, looking, where am I? Did I hit the point that I've gotten and come back to it? It doesn't have to be and by the way, I've hopefully done this enough to develop the habit where I'm doing this in a somewhat seamless way. It doesn't have to be something that takes a long time after we develop the habit. But it does require us to take time in the beginning when we're learning how to grow in these virtues. Mm-hmm. And so what that really means is to actually take the time, not just react, to take a moment and think. Try to just ponder, try to be deliberate.
Especially before you're about to write an email or a WhatsApp or a message when you are very angry to someone that you are very upset. Think before you do that. Right?
That's exactly right. Because if the emotions are riled up, that's all the more reason, all the more time for us to take a moment, stop, think.
Cálmate, respira.
Exactly. And if it's anger or fear, we said mostly think we have to remove ourselves from the object, then reformulate the object. And once the object is reformulated, we're seeing not just the bad, but the good. Then hopefully we're in a perspective where we have clarity. And now we're starting. See, that's a great example. Let's say someone just sent me an email and they upset me.
They offended you, they insult you, whatever. They
insulted my mom, my wife, and my daughter. Right? All my three tops. And now I'm like, oh, all right. I'm not going to have circumspection in that moment. I can't. The anger is going to blind me from seeing whatever good. Is there a good to be had? Is there a good that I can actually achieve in fulfilling my purpose if I receive an email offending me and offending my loved ones?
Yeah, many goods.
Give me some of that, Eduardo.
Well, patience on.
Good. Patience is tolerating an evil with equanimity. That's great.
Given the benefit of the doubt that it must be something that person must be wounded. So let me put myself in their shoes. So let me forgive that person in advance. So many.
That's part of justice, the virtue of forgiveness. Mm-hmm.
Humility, because you've been humiliated.
That's right. And we're suffering. By the way, I've done a whole lot of terrible things. Earlier just said understanding. Exactly right. Mm-hmm. It's a virtue of seeing creative things and connecting them. By the way, the virtue of self-introspection. Mm-hmm. Hold on a second. Maybe I did something.
Exactly. Right? Because the fact that he's reacting like this is because that person is wounded. Why? Oh, I did this before, like 6 months ago. You know?
The toughest one. Self-knowledge is part of prudence. And self-knowledge is a tough one because we see ourselves naturally and rightfully as good. If we did, we wouldn't talk, right?
So can you imagine all the amazing goods that we just said it right now compared to boom, you know? Right. And now it's a war, you know?
It's like in a circumspection. All these things are there. It just keeps the eyes, the virtuous eyes to see. We have that custody of our mind, custody of our senses to see these things. It's like in those games where they have little Easter eggs, like video games. I don't know if you know about this, but they hide little things in video games they're called Easter eggs, mm-hmm. right? Because in the U.S., we hide Easter eggs, right, during Easter, and kids do an egg hunt. And in a video game, they'll put Easter eggs in there, which are little hidden things that you don't know. If you take the guy and you put him next to a tree and you jump 3 times, the little thing's gonna fall. The Easter eggs are around us all the time. But what happens is if we don't have prudence and we lack circumspection, either because of the emotions, or because of cognitive associations, or because we lack knowledge, or because we're tired and we're just disposed to not be, thinking properly, we're going to lose the opportunity for good. So much good can be had by just taking a moment and think, okay, let me try to focus on the actual circumstances, right? There's also not only the circumspection, looking around, there's a virtue of foresight. Where is this going? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we act quickly, even if we know the circumstance. Okay, this is it. But we don't see what's going to be the effect of this thing, right? And again, going back to anger or fear, if we're acting out on these things not reasonably, our anger can have a ripple effect. So, I'm trying to, I gave the example of a guy who's trying to get there was an injustice and he didn't get this particular product that he paid for wasn't working. And instead of, trying to work it out, he just got angry, started yelling at the person, just get it done, right? Lack of foresight. Why? Because we're dealing with humans. Do you think that yelling at the guy who's gonna serve you your food is the smartest thing to do? The answer is no, right? You gotta have foresight. How do we gain foresight? The same way we gain circumspection. It's developed mostly by stopping and thinking. It seems so obvious, and it's almost self-evident, and it seems so easy.
It's very hard.
It's neither of those things, right? It is very hard. We have a tendency to be just quick. We have a tendency to react, especially to the emotions, literally, because they move us, to just react. All that is a recipe for improvements. Now, by the way, can you grow in this? Yes, the answer is yes. And that growth means that the time from the act to the time of the deliberation gets shorter and shorter and shorter. It's an acquired habit. And after a while, we get into the habit of not only thinking and trying to be deliberate in all things. Eventually, we're going to reach, God willing, the level when we're praying always. It's actually a command that we find in the scriptures to pray always. And we'll see that it doesn't mean sitting here and just like thinking, focused 100% on God or reciting, rote prayers in our head. It's a whole different thing. Prayer is a proper act of a virtue that we can actually develop. But in the same way, all those higher virtues build on the most basic. They require us to take our time to actually deliberate, to actually meditate, to take in the circumstances before we talk, before we act, before we speak. I knew a person who tried to develop prudence in this way. It took 40 days. It was actually a lengthy thing they did. And it took 40 days. And in those 40 days, here's what they did. They didn't respond to anybody in any way, shape, or form before they took 5 seconds to think about it. Can you imagine if we did that? 5 seconds is a long time.
That's an amazing exercise tool.
It was fantastic. And the discipline and the results in this person from before those 40 days after was literally a marked difference. And there was so much more peace, and there was so much more tranquility, just because they took 5 seconds before responding to people. It's wonderful. And it's so prudent, right? Okay, so that has to do with knowing our surroundings, knowing where something's going, looking forward, right?
Another example of circumspection, Leo, and I have seen this many times, and actually I did it a couple of times 15 years ago. First time, and this is maybe you don't remember this, but I grew up in Mexico, northern Mexico, and Catholic, but we never had this tradition to pray before we eat. We just assume that we were already grateful to God, but we never pray before the meals, right? The first time I saw a group of people doing that in a restaurant was with you. I forgot what place was, but it was like you were doing Going Deeper back in the days to teenagers, and we went to this restaurant, and I was so like moved and so like touched to see like 16, 17, 15-year-old boys and girls who were like, I don't know, 7, and you and me, and the food came, and automatically everybody closed their eyes and made the sign of the cross, and they start, saying grace, and it was amazing. And since that day, I started that habit. But because it was new to me, I remember one day going to a meeting, and it was like my manager back in the days, and few agents, and a couple actors, and the food came. I said, should we pray? And it was like two atheists, and it was like another friend. My manager was Jewish, and a few others who, they look at me as like and I was imprudent. Why? Because I was like imposing like my belief system to people that I just met the first night. Instead of me saying my prayer individually, take 5 seconds, to me, I can still do the sign of the cross in silence, and then I eat. Instead of guys, let's pray before we eat, right? So that, would you say that that's lack of circumspection in a situation like this where I don't know these people?
Thank you for your humility in sharing that, Eduardo. It may well could be, right? It depends on the circumstances. I don't know if enough circumstances, but generally speaking, yes, if you're going to be imposing our beliefs publicly on a bunch of other people, that probably isn't, there's certain virtues, like the virtues of counsel, that require us knowing that the person is open, that there's reasonable hope, they're going to take the teaching, so on and so forth, right? Why do I speak so freely on this chat? Well, because we said it from the beginning. Eduardo was literally opening this up and inviting all these people to come precisely to listen to this.
Right.
It
is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully you're here. We used to see some comments of like, hey, dude, shut up, or what are you talking about, or whatever. And I'm seeing less and less of those. I think people are starting to understand this is Eduardo's house. He's invited you into his house, and this is what's going to happen in his house. But I promise you, for the most part at work, when I was working at 20th Century Fox, I'm not sitting there talking about this stuff in the middle of the workplace.
Why not?
Because that's not my job. It wouldn't be prudent. Now, by the way, is it prudent, however, to separate entirely in totality our belief systems from our work systems? The answer is no.
No.
We always have to know and to love God. Now, that means we have to be prudent. Now, we have to know how to apply the principles. But we should never be using evil means. I don't care whether it's your work or your wife or your husband or your kids. We should never be doing evil things, whether it's our work requires it or not, right? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to have a session on the states of life, and we're going to see how that actually works out. All right. So when it comes to the actual knowledge of a thing, it requires studiosity. We have to learn from the learned, and that requires studying, or it requires taking counsel. We didn't talk about this. Taking counsel also means going to people who know this, not being afraid to ask for help, not being afraid of saying, I've offered people, if you think I have some semblance of knowledge in the things that I'm talking about, I have a direct message me. Now, I'm not a psychologist, and let's not get too into the specifics of whatever stuff is in your life. But if you have questions about the general principles, I'm here, and I'm happy to help. Or find somebody who does.
Yeah, a spiritual director or a mentor.
That's right, some sort of mentor, someone who knows this stuff and who knows it at a deep level is the way to go. And we do, like I said, we do this automatically in other parts, right? We don't just think like, well, you know what? I'm not a mechanic, but I'm gonna fix my car. I'm gonna figure it out on my own. It's just me and the car. I'm gonna figure it out. When people have this notion, it's just me and God. It's just a personal thing. I'll just figure it out. It's not how it works. It just isn't. It isn't in any field of inquiry. Why would it be in this, right? And the one thing that's going to kill that is if we're going to judge the person, and we're going to judge not what they say, but the exteriors of that person before we take the counsel, right? When it comes to the surroundings, that's the circumspection and foresight. How do we grow in that? Two ways. One, we have to learn to be deliberate and learn to meditate. Secondly, take an example. Right? I don't know. Let's say I just got invited to a fancy dinner, and there's all kinds of forks that are in front of me, and a bunch of knives, and there's a little one, and there's one across the top that's smaller than the others, and one's 3-prong, one's 4-prong. And I don't know how to use the fork. What do? Do I just sit there and just start eating? Well, that would be, it could be rude. It could be a form of injustice. It could be what's called admiratio, which is a vice about everybody, hey, look at me. It's undue attention to yourself. What would I do? I would look around to people who know what they're doing and then imitate what they are doing. They say imitation is a form of flattery. I'll go even deeper than that. Imitation is actually necessary to grow in the moral life. When someone's writing what it is, they're setting forth a model that we are to imitate. It isn't just about learning necessarily by reading or listening. It's also by seeing example and trusting people who are wiser than us, holier than us, better than us at a certain topic, and follow what they do.
But that's in the right order, because it could be the other way around, to have the wrong role models, where you end up imitating the wrong instead of the right.
Exactly right. And we're going to do another session, God willing, on friendship. And there's actually a definition of friendship. There's a purpose that we can identify in the very nature of friendship itself, certain concordant, certain attributes. And it's all, if it doesn't lead you to your purpose, to the immediate good, the immediate truth, and to God, if people aren't fanning the flames of your goodness, then they're not friends, properly speaking. And, we have to deal with everybody in this life, obviously with charity and understanding. But the people around us should be the people that are helping us grow, and we should be the ones that are helping them grow. Recall, the purpose that we have is a general purpose for all humans. We're all called, we're all in the same boat, rowing towards the same end.
Mm-hmm.
At least we should be. That's our design. And so let's all grab an oar and get in there together, right? So these are about the virtues, about the circumstances. The virtues about the knowledge, right? Then the virtue about the object, then the virtue about the circumstances, the surroundings, that's circumspection and foresight. And then there's a virtue interiorly about our intent. Right? The virtues interiorly about our intent is what's called forming a proper conscience. It's the virtues that are necessary in order for us to have a conscience. There's a list of them. There's memory, caution, shrewdness, understanding. I can go on and on, but I'm not going to because there's just so many of them, right? But here's the gist of the lot of them. What it is having the ability to bring to the forefront the good to the exclusion of the evil. Why? Because prudence is what clarifies our mind towards the truth so that we can make a judgment towards the good. The darkness in our intellect is that which obscures the true, so it disinclines us from the good so that we can choose the evil. So what's the one way that we know our intention is going to be impure and we're not going to be able to have the proper perspective is if, I hate to say it again, if our emotions precipitate our judgments. In other words, if I'm not acting on what the intellect says to be true, but on what the emotions present, the image. I saw a comment earlier, not in this session, but in the previous one, where people might have the impression that I'm saying that the emotions are bad. No, because the emotions are good, because they are vehement, because they are necessary, they have a life of their own. And so they need to be controlled and they need to be ordered. Because pleasure feels so good, it has a vehemence that could put a perspective that could hinder us. Because anger is so strong, it could draw us away from seeing the bigger picture. It's because they're good and necessary that they are so vehement. And because they are so vehement, when they're off, they could be off, not just dying, they have tendency to go boom and go way up. That's why they need to be ordered. Emotions are amazing and necessary and good. They're creative, right?
You need that. Your passion, when you're working, love what you do, you working with passion, with, your emotion. But as you said, they have to be ordered towards what? Towards reason, but the reason has to be well formed.
Exactly. And so when they're not, when they have a life of their own, when they move before reason, that's called precipitation. That means your judgment is precipitated because the image is already obscured by the emotion. That's the vice of precipitation. It's acting on something other than reason. That is, acting without thinking. That's what happens when our emotions are antecedent, prior to reason. Precipitate is when the appetites themselves precipitate the judgment. They happen before the judgment. And so by definition, they will cloud the clarity of judgment. Anything that affects the clarity of the image we have in our mind when we make moral judgment will affect prudence. So if our conscience isn't clear, in other words, if we have really, really bad experiences, we probably aren't the best to judge. Now, that might sound harsh, right? But it sadly is true. In other words, we know this intuitively. The mechanic that we trust is the one who has the right experiences, right in the sense of, he knows, I hear that clicking in the car, that must be this timing belt or this whatever. Their experience gives them the ability to have the proper memories, have the proper images to know when they hear that clicking, that's what it means in the car. If we have the wrong experience, right? So if my only experience of bananas is I got beat by them as a kid by my grandmother, then I'm not going to have the proper perspective relative to bananas. Same with us. Our images and our memories, if we have the wrong experiences, those images and those memories obscure what our perspective is on the thing. And what do I mean by wrong, right? Well, we have to know the principles. So if, let's say we talked about, what could be a good example? If I grew up with a drunken father who, and I did, my dad was amazing, right? But let's just say this ex-person grows up with a drunken father who beat them, right? Those bad experiences might taint the way they approach liquor, fatherhood, etc. So we have to examine ourselves to know, are there wounds there?
And they can be healed.
Of course. And that's
the good news.
Is to get the right experiences to heal those wounds so that we have the proper perspective. So we don't go the one way or the other. The one way is like everyone and anybody who ever drinks a sip of anything alcoholic is evil and bad.
Right.
The other extreme is, hey, let's all go out and get turned, and if that's the term that kids are using nowadays, and get drunk and just go do whatever we want. Right? We want to aim for the mean, but if our experiences are off, we're not going to be properly disposed towards that object, and so we're not going to have the proper perspective because of the wounds. So we have to know ourselves. We have to see, where are we wounded? Where is that sensitivity towards a thing? We have to start reading the principles, the application of the principles. So example, one principle is that drunkenness is obviously wrong. It inhibits our ability to be able to make right judgments. But drinking in moderation is not wrong. Why? Because it's proper eutralia. There's some health benefits. It could help by way of vigor, and it also doesn't obscure judgment. But hey, where's the line? Well, that's where prudence comes into play. I know of proper circumstances of my past behaviors and my memory to know that I can do 1 glass of wine or 1.5, but I can't do 4 if I do something. You see how all that comes into play? All those things have to be properly put in their perspective in order to get to the proper conclusion. And in order to not be precipitated, we have to know where our wounds are. So then, how do we know where our wounds are? We have to look for our sensitivities. We know when we are wrong at some level. We know if we have some level of conscience, which we all do, hey, listen, I was mean. I blew up. I was angry. Oh, man, maybe I was a little greedy with this. I didn't share enough. Maybe I wasn't forgiving. That's the starting point. Prudence is going to require the self-knowledge to us to know, listen, my primary defect here, the one thing I suffer with is I have a tendency to lie a lot. I have a tendency to exaggerate a lot. I have a tendency to gossip a lot. I have a tendency to overeat. Whatever that is, look at that, then we're going to see where our sensitivity is. And if we see where our sensitivity is, we can see where the bad experiences are. We can try to get the opposing virtue, grow in that virtue, heal the wound, and then have the proper perspective, right? Then we're judging, we're training our associations and our cogitative power to have a proper perspective on the image. Okay. I think that's it for tonight. I know I've spoken a lot, but let me see.
That was awesome. That was great, brother.
If there's anything, I think there's one more thing. Where is it? Give me 1 second. Oh, yes. Finally. If we're going to be docile, take counsel, learn these principles, be deliberate, take that moment to think before we act, it requires a particular virtue of prudence that is called caution. Right? Caution is, if I know that these are the circumstances upon which I'm going to fail, don't put myself in those circumstances. We know it, obviously, when it comes to a person who's an alcoholic, that, the 12-step program, clearly one of the steps is you don't go back to the bar immediately. Don't put yourself in that situation, right? The heroin addict doesn't go to the place where they were buying the heroin. We have
an alcoholic doesn't work as a bartender,
Exactly right. We have to, if we're growing in these virtues, caution requires us to know, okay, not only have I grown in the virtue whereby I'm learning, I'm growing in that self-knowledge that I can prove it. I know what my faults are enough to get a general picture of, okay, here's the things where I'm sensitive, here's the things where I have bad experiences, right? So I've grown enough in that sense. Now the next step is, what were the circumstances that caused me to go down that path? All right, when my wife comes in the room and she says, Leo, with that voice, oh, I know that's the trigger, right? So in my mind, I have to try to remove that object and reformulate it. I have to say, okay, that's the moment, that's the thing that happens. So I need to try to relate to that in a different way. I need to separate myself from that. That's caution. I know if I start at 11 o'clock at night, getting on Instagram, I'm going to be up till 12:30, surfing crazy things imprudently, and I'm going to wake up late in the morning. That's the virtue of caution. How do you grow in the virtue of caution? Well, it flows from the virtue of self-knowledge. Once we start knowing ourselves, once we start being deliberate, one of the things that we're going to start associating is the memory of the circumstances that surrounded the last time we fell into this vice, or this thing. And so, two ways to do it. One, the same as we've been talking about, deliberation, meditation. Two, same thing we've been talking about, counsel, right? Having somebody that holds you accountable. Listen, I know tomorrow it's going to be at 12:30. I'm going to be starving because I didn't have breakfast. I'm going to want to eat 17 slices of pizza. So Eduardo, tomorrow at 12:15, I need you to help me. I need you to stop me. Right? I'm going to grow in the virtue of caution by borrowing your prudence. And you're going to be my eyes and my ears. At that time, I'm going to be like, get out of the way. I'm going to eat all this pizza. So I need you to help me and stop me. Right? So prudence is always that. It's the knowing by borrowing the truth, and then the meditating on it ourselves, and the meditating of it in the moment, which is the deliberation. Taking counsel, being docile to that counsel, and then deliberating so that in the moment, we're not just acting. And I think that's a deeper version of prudence for everyone to think about.
Wow.
All right?
I think we should do they're saying that, there's a debate, but 21 days, if you do something every day for 21 days, you develop that habit, it turns into a virtue. So,
40 was the number that
that's what I'm saying. There's debate. Some people say 21, 40. Some people say 59. It doesn't matter. But I think the minimum is 21. So why don't we start with the minimum, with the 5 seconds before, today? That would be a good exercise for,
It's a fantastic one. We want to go on prudence. By the way, it's going to develop a habit, but it's not, don't worry saying, I'm taking my time. Just give me a second, right? Because there really isn't a downside. I don't see a downside to taking a moment. Maybe if it's not 5 seconds, just 3 seconds. Even if it's just, let me take a second, right?
Yeah, just the thought of, I'm going to take it, just breathe, and thinking about how this is going to benefit my response, it changes the game.
Wait, say again, Edward?
I'm saying that just the fact that you're thinking, I'm going to breathe, that can even change the game in how I respond.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That little moment.
It's just a little moment. Remember about this particular session on this, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So for those who, sometimes I struggle about, about that. I think I am a little better, but I can still develop more virtues. So I'm going to invite everyone to, especially those who sometimes tienen mecha corta. I don't know how you say that in English. It makes sense?
Short fuse.
Short fuse. So for those who have mecha corta, I think this is an amazing exercise just to think before you're about to respond in a meeting or in a message, WhatsApp, email, whatever it is, the occasion. Think twice before you want to answer or respond. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, brother, so much. Leo, like always. So tomorrow between, huh? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I thought you you had to go.
It's up to you. We're good?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Well, first, Mario from Memphis says, man, let Eduardo talk for just a second, bro. Apparently, I've been interrupting you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, Mario. But the idea of this going deeper is to Leo to talk. I'm just add a few things here and there and reflections and questions, but the less I talk is better. I promise you. Let's listen. You have plenty of me saying a lot of other things in other videos, but right now it's really an honor to have you here, brother, sharing your wisdom and your knowledge.
For sure. Katya, if we have bad experiences, can they turn into a frustration? Well, yeah. And as much as we talked a little bit about rumination, right? And if we keep focusing on the bad, then we have a tendency to in our mind, recycle the bad. And that recycling of the bad, continually be thinking and start eating away at us, right? That's the definition of rumination. It's the focusing on the negative aspects of a thing that moves the sorrowful emotions in us repeatedly. So, the short answer is this. If we focus in just the bad of the experience, then that could lead to this sort of rumination. But if we take up our bad experiences and try to turn them into good, use them as fuel for good, then it's the exact opposite. It's a form of liberation. Let's see. Gia or Glothrix says, bringing ourselves to the present moment is so important. Stop and think before you act, before you speak. Don't judge the messenger. Judge the accuracy. As usual, you guys have summarized what we've been talking about much better than I have. Let's see. Jordan, this is a good one from Sarah. She said, Jordan P. Peterson, who I'm a fan, says that we never won't know ourselves, but we can always watch. I think we never fully know ourselves. We can always watch ourselves. I think that's right? So let's just keep, even if we don't have full knowledge interiorly of every single motive, which is really obscure to us, at the very least we know what we're saying and we can hear that and keep a watch out for what we're doing and what we're saying. Claire says sometimes she has a short fuse. I doubt it, Claire.
Welcome to the club.
Aim is asking, when does God's grace come into play? Can most inner wounds be healed by our own doing? 90% of our inner wounds reside in subconscious. No. What we're talking about is the obvious one, and we haven't talked yet about supernatural means, but you're onto something. If our ultimate goal is supernatural and it resides in knowing and loving God, then there has to be a supernatural means to attain that. And we're going to talk about that at length when we talk about grace. Thank you, Arwen, as usual. Let's see. We'll do a couple more. Why do we tend, this is from Kadi, why do we tend to lose our temper easily with the people that are closest to us? Fantastic question and a great observation, Kadi. The reason is because we are most sensitive to the people that are closest to us because that's the way love works. So we see it in the opposite. If someone you love gets hurt or someone does something to someone you love, you can get really, really angry. But if someone does something to a stranger, you don't care as much. Or if something happens to a stranger, you don't hurt as much. And it's that same sensitivity to the ones we love that makes it so that we're sensitive to us being injured by them as well, or to us lashing out for them in the same way, because our hearts are sensitive to that emotion. Let's see. Okay, so Magnolia says this. I think that comes naturally for others because of personalities. For example, some people naturally think before they speak, but some people naturally speak as they're thinking. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yes, our matter and the way our soul interacts with our bodies, our lips, our words, the images in our imagination, our memory, it's in a certain way determined by our material disposition. And just as some are taller than others and shorter than others, some are smarter than others, etc., etc. And so some have natural dispositions that tend towards faster thought, faster processing, faster whatever. But the virtue nonetheless requires that we don't do that just by nature, just by the way we're disposed, but that we have reason come to the table and therefore do it by habit. All right, the last one is one that's off topic, but it's from M. Jimenez. And she says, off subject, do you believe God creates one person for us, or maybe a few that we should marry? Kind of like a soulmate, I guess. Well, it's interesting. God always respects our free will, obviously. So we know that nothing in this world relative to our free will is determined wholly by God, right? However, God also creates every single soul from nothing that is created. So in a certain sense, from his eternal perspective, there is that one person for those who are called to marriage that will be the source of the possibility of either life together or life in communion with others. So that's a great way for me to dodge the question entirely. All right, folks, have a good night.
Frater, thank you so much, like always. Buenas noches, hermano. Nos vemos mañana entre 9 y 10, más o menos. Según tu trabajo. Si quieres a las 8, mándame un mensajito. Send me a message and let me know if 9 or 9:30 works for you, and let's do it, all right?
So long, everybody. Hope you got something useful out of tonight.
It was awesome. It was amazing, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome. So long, everybody. Good night.
Buenas noches, Frater.
Bye.
Dios te bendiga. Él fue Leo Severino, productor de cine. Con él hice la película Bella. Hicimos también Little Boy y ahora Sound of Freedom, que próximamente va a salir. Sorpresa. Ya les diremos por dónde, cómo, cuándo. Por este medio y por muchos medios más. Entonces, bueno, Leo Severino, productor, guionista, filósofo, teólogo y escritor. Tiene ya su libro Going Deeper en inglés. Estamos trabajando en la traducción para sacarlo en español muy pronto. Familia, buenas noches. Dios los bendiga. Nos vemos mañana a la 1 de la tarde por Facebook en el Rosario por el Mundo, 1 de la tarde en el Rincón Guadalupano. Aquí en México, en su casa. Aquí está el Rincón Guadalupano. Ahí está el Rincón Guadalupano, aquí a unos metros. Ahí es donde rezamos el rosario todos los días. Y el 13 de mayo a la 1 de la tarde, hora de la Ciudad de México, el Día de la Virgen de Fátima, tenemos la meta de llegar a 50,000 personas entre YouTube, Facebook, Instagram y, bueno, todas las redes que se vayan a sumar, pero principalmente esas 3. A ver si llegamos a rezar el rosario con 50,000 personas de diferentes partes del mundo. Sería increíble. Siempre he dicho, me imaginaba un estadio de diferentes personas de diferentes partes del mundo tomadas de la mano rezando el rosario por el mundo. Se abre el cielo y una lluvia de gracia para todos. Dios mediante y se logre. Depende de todos que me ayudan a promover el evento. Hagan sus banners, hagan sus invitaciones. Mándenlas a sus invitados, familiares, amigos, en fin, sin pena, sin vergüenza. Invítenlos a rezar el rosario. Incluso los que no lo rezan, invítenlos. Nunca se sabe. Vean lo que pasó con Bosco ayer, que nos contó Bosco Gutiérrez, que el taxista que lo llevó a su casa después de que se escapó del secuestro. Traía un rosario colgado, el taxista. Y le dijo, ¿lo rezas o lo traes de adorno? No, pues lo traigo de adorno, te invito a rezarlo. Y lo rezaron y ese rosario le cambió la vida a Bosco y al chofer, el taxista, que en ese momento estaba pasándola muy difícil y en ese momento estaba también a punto de divorciarse y en ese momento estaba con miles de broncas y le pregunta a Bosco, ¿y tú qué quieres ser? No, pues músico, pues va a ser músico. Y bueno, para no hacer ese cuento tan largo, el tema es que ahora trabaja como músico, está con su esposa, le va muy bien, es muy amigo de Bosco, y todo empezó por un rosario, porque antes del rosario, este señor quería bajar a Bosco del taxi porque no quería entrar a la carretera como un loco, pensaba que era un loco. Imagínate, se acababa de escapar de un secuestro de 9 meses, entonces parecía un loco. Y, y el coche se descompone y antes de literalmente decirle el coche no sirve, ya bájate, ahí fue cuando le dijo, ¿y este rosario es de adorno o lo rezas? Es de adorno, te invito a rezarlo. Cuando lo rezaron, de pronto el coche prendió. Después Bosco se enteró que el coche nunca se descompuso, simplemente lo quería bajar, por eso hizo como que se descompuso. Y después Bosco le hizo la pregunta, oye, ¿por qué primero me querías bajar y después no? Porque me dio la confianza, me diste mucha confianza cuando me invitaste a rezar el rosario. Eso fue lo que cambió todo. Entonces, y eso fue lo que le cambió la vida a él también después, porque Bosco le regaló su coche, cuando lo lleva a su casa, le regala su coche y lo ayuda, le paga la carrera y en fin, una historia increíble por el rosario. Entonces, nunca sabes qué puede pasar con el rosario. Los que lo rezamos sí sabemos, pasan cosas increíbles y pasan cosas grandes, porque cuando Dios se manifiesta en grande. Eso es cosa seria, ¿eh? Así es que ánimo y fuerza. Los quiero mucho, familia. Dios los bendiga. Paz y bien y pásenla bien. Paz y bien y pásenla bien. Dios los bendiga, familia. Ánimo y fuerza. Paz y bien y pásenla bien.